All right, good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and call this work session to order. Today is the 29th of September. It's 10 a.m. We are here to discuss the administration's response to AR 2023-299S, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly requesting the administration notify the community about the possible usage of the former solid waste service central transfer station facility as a temporary congregate shelter or a navigation and warming center to aid persons experiencing homelessness. So I'm not sure who on the body wants to begin this conversation, or should we just hand it over? Okay, I see a handing over. Before we do that, we'll go ahead and do introductions.
George Martinez.
Randy Solt.
Anna Brawley.
Felix Rivera.
Scott Myers.
Zach Johnson.
Meg Zalatow.
Christopher Constant. Is there anyone on the phone? So with that, Ms. Johnson.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Alexis Johnson, Anchorage Health Department. The slide deck that you're going to see is pretty similar to what we went over at the Housing and Homelessness Committee meeting, but there is some updates I'd like to share with you today. Next slide, please.
I'll note that Ms. Bronco just arrived.
All right, so on today's agenda, we'll talk about the intent to bid that is closing. Obviously, we are going to talk about the Solid Waste Services admin facility, the timeline, and of course, the community is interested in the demobbing of the camps. Next slide, please.
Hold on 1 second, please.
This work session is only noticed to solid waste
Can you clarify, is this going to be broader than just about using the solid waste services building? And if it's going to at all deal with the funding of any of the options for emergency cold weather shelter?
Through the chair, to Ms. Zaltel, the only update for funding is when the ITB closes and when the contracts will be brought before the body. It actually doesn't discuss any funding today.
Sorry about that. Proceed.
Oh, totally fine. All right, so to give an update, we did post the intent to bids for congregate and non-congregate facility. Originally, we were set to close at the end of this month today, but because we had a power outage at City Hall, it actually canceled our pre-bid conference and therefore has pushed out the ITB. The congregate facility, ITB closes the 2nd and the non-congregate closes the 4th of October. The award should follow that, and then we'll engage with contractors on negotiations. And just to give everyone an update, our assumptions after our initial discussions prior to the ITB and the RFI was that 272 beds, non-congregate beds, would be becoming available at location 1, 100 beds at location 2, and up to 150 beds at location 3, which we now know as the SWS Administrative Building. So that's a total of 522 beds. We know that 400 have been requested to be fully funded. Next slide, please. So currently, Anchorage Health Department Outreach has been working with providers to figure out which campers are planning to seek shelter this winter and which ones are wanting to continue to camp. We have been surveying which facility they believe would best fit their needs if they need ADA compliance, matching them with an ADA facility, and then viability and projected success in a non-congregate versus congregate setting. Our priority is to work with campers and clients at 3rd and Ingra Encampment, Chauncey, Cuddy Park Archive, and Davis Park. Those are the 4 main encampments that we've been performing outreach at, and it's our goal to get 3rd and Ingra posted and closed and to move all clients into sheltering and housing as the shelter beds are available. Next slide, please. So this is an updated timeline. We do know that the ITB was posted September 15th. We now have an update for the closure date, which is October 2nd and October 4th, excuse me. Today, I wanted to give an update that emergency cold weather shelters for families will open October 1st. We'll talk about that just a little bit later. And then we've been working with Renican, and because the water and freezing temperatures, they are removing the hand washing stations on October 1st at the encampments. Once the ITB closes, we award those. We will come forward to the assembly for contract approval at the October 10th meeting. I just want to give everyone a heads up. There will be a number of late on the table documents because we will not be able to meet the addendum timeline for that. So Here is fair warning. We are working with campers. We will be passing out flyers, letting campers know that upcoming shelter is available and to get registered and where they, surveyed where they best want to go. We do have plans to open location 1 and location 2 if everything goes according to plan on the ITB. Again, this is all hypothetical pending the procurement process on October 16th. Initially, we had told the body that it was October 15th, which is a Sunday. Sunday is not a great day for services. There's limited transportation. Not a lot of social service providers have extended hours like they would on business days. So Monday, October 16th is the day we are set to open. Bathrooms are planning to be removed due to freezing temperatures October 16th or sooner. The contractor has alerted us to that. And to talk more today about SWS, we do have a plan to open it October 16th, but we are undergoing a bunch of fire inspection corrections in that building. So you'll get notice of that as well. Next slide, please. So to give some updates on the admin building today, we did have our fire inspection done at the facility. Originally, we were given an estimate of about $60,000 in repairs. We now know that with the bids we have, that corrective actions will be about $150,000, making this facility available and habitable for people. We are planning to utilize this facility pending contract approval from the Assembly and community notification under AR 2023-299 S version. We have met with Midtown Community Council and Campbell Park. Taku Campbell's Community Council is next week, and we are planning to attend that as well. Next slide, please.
I have a question
Oh.
for Ms. Brawley on the bathrooms.
Yeah, sorry, before we get too far in the admin building, you said you guys are removing the bathrooms from the camps over the winter. And I just wonder, so what is the alternative for people? And then, I've seen other places where portable toilets are used in the winter. I've used one myself at Goose Lake Park, for example. So I recognize that freezing temperatures do add logistical issues, but I just want to flag that before we get further.
Yes, through the chair. So at these encampments, the use of these facilities, it has a higher use, and there's actually a lot more damage and cleanliness that needs to take place at these versus, everyday wear and tear at Goose Lake Park, for instance. And the contractor has told us that in order to properly maintain hygiene and cleanliness at these facilities, they need water, and they cannot clean these facilities in freezing temperatures to the cleanliness level that they need to. And so they have told us that they are planning to remove it due to freezing temperatures.
I guess I'm not happy with that, but I understand the answer. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So to go against clean slate strategy and to look at everything, how this building fits against it, we have met all the requirements except for zoning. This is an I-5 zone, but Title 16 under the Anchorage Health Department, under a Title 16 declaration, which is triggered for 3 reasons. The mayor declares a civic emergency, the weather is dropped below 45 degrees temperature, or the health director has waived or activated it. I just wanted to let the body know that Director Rash has activated Title 16 so that Christian Health Associates can operate legally because they are also not zoned correctly. We are contractually obligated with them to start their operations on October 1st. This is not an emergency declaration. It is a mere activation and does not bypass any procurement process. And there's no additional needs under that. So I just want to let that know that it has been activated. Next slide, please.
Actually, before we go on.
Yep, go ahead, Ms. Elto.
Thank you. So I was just looking at the Title 21 use table, and I don't see any residential allowances, like overnight habitation allowances under the I categories. So that raises some concern. I think that those uses are probably excluded for particular reasons. The only one I see that requires a conditional use permit would be a correctional community residential center, but that would be a conditional use process. Otherwise, everything else is for purposes of daytime only and no overnight. So I want to flag that because this would be a really anomalous use in an industrial zone.
Through the chair to Ms. Zolotel, I am not a lawyer, but I will refer this to law to see if they have any guidance on that. So thank you. So you guys have seen this slide, but this is to show existing fence. There is a cedar fence on site, but we do plan to add a chain link fence on the north side of the facility to separate clients of the shelter from the main CTS. And there is a few vehicles back there. There's a fuel drum back there. And so we do plan to add additional chain link fence on the north side. Next slide, please. Again, this is just a snapshot of how close this facility is to residential neighborhoods. We know that with Sullivan Arena, we did have quite a few residents that were unhappy with some of the people loitering around, walking through their yards and such. And so I did want to flag that this is a number distance away from any residential neighborhood. And two of the closest neighborhoods are actually separated by 8 lanes of highway. So there is no close neighborhood. Next slide, please. All right. One of the questions is, where is the nearest bus stop? The nearest bus stop is Old Seward and 56th Avenue. Walking distance, it is about 1,000 feet. The only thing that we flagged as could be problematic is that in order to be on a sidewalk, you have to cross over 56th, then walk down the sidewalk, and then cross back over 56th to the north side of the road to get onto the bus. This is a well-lit, as you can see in the photo, walk path street. We met with Brad Coy at traffic. He sent over a traffic study that was done right before the SWS bond was put forward, and we don't seem to think that traffic is an issue for pedestrians over here. Next slide, please. Again, this is just some snapshots of the inside of the building. The large bays will be utilized for shelter beds and personal tote storage. There is a number of private offices that we plan to use for navigation, intake, and give offices to outreach workers from different providers. We've had a number of outside entities and nonprofits that are interested in having an office on site.
Quick question, the large bays, these are the large bays in the admin building.
Yes, sir, they are. And these are being cleaned as we speak.
I just want to make sure we weren't talking about the large bays of the tipping floor. Thanks.
There's also 2 large spaces. One is has like a linoleum floor, and the other one that you'll see has a carpeted floor. We do have plans for dining and food service in the one shown, and then day engagement center upstairs on the carpeted floor.
So what's the insulation heat situation in the large bays? Because those were typically truck storage previously.
Yes. So when we asked the question of SWS, they said that people do work in these bays and that they are heated.
Heated how, to what temperature? Will it be a utility cost to keep them kind of heated as a routine matter? Is there any plans to further insulate the bay doors? Because working in those conditions and being dressed for work that involves both being inside and outside is very different than being in your place of habitation.
Through the chair to Ms. Zolotel, yes, absolutely. I can definitely look into that and see if we can get a temperature read on that.
Can you also, as you go through the presentation, address security and whether you'll have any on-site security and so forth?
Through the chair to Mr. Solt. So in our ITB, we do have a number of staff ratio, safety personnel ratio. I did meet with APD to see if they do patrols of the area. They do not do regular patrols down 56th Avenue. So that is one thing that we should possibly look into if we want to have APD near. But the contract in the ITB that we put out does have safety personnel required for the facility.
Mr. Martinez.
Thank you. Just one point for now. You mentioned when you showed the graph of the location with the different kind of distances to residential. One of the things you mentioned was previous complaints around the Sullivan, and you used the term loitering. And my immediate reaction was loitering is different than kind of moving in and around the area where you're moving to and from, essentially, right? And so, with the amount of foot traffic to the Sullivan, from leaving the Sullivan going even to where resources could be further downtown, navigation center and the soup kitchen, for example, it seems that there was a transit relationship and transit issue with respect to loitering and the Sullivan, right? And so there aren't those resources necessarily even walking distance, particularly in this time in this particular location. So one of the things that I've always talked about is how do you have, when you move into a further scattered site model from away from where core services are delivered. Ron from Grubstake always talks about this is the core of where people are, and there are all these resources around. So I just wanted to get to, is there a way we can, or have you all considered funding or request for or operation around transportation to help, not necessarily the public transportation the way you described? That doesn't seem like a feasible particular route when probably most people at the Sullivan were on foot traffic. There was bus traffic as well, but foot traffic seems to be important. And so if there are up to 150 people, is there some plan or can there be some strategy around dedicated transportation, shuttle, or et cetera? It's something that I've talked about with respect to clinical transportation, but this seems, as you go further out from the core, maybe a more pressing issue. Thank you.
Through the chair to Mr. Martinez. So I'll address two things. One of the issues that we saw at the Sullivan Arena were that we had people who are not clients of the Sullivan Arena coming to the Sullivan Arena to engage with clients. And they would hang out in the Sullivan Arena parking lot and not engage with services indoors. One of the things about this facility is that it is kind of secluded in that it is fenced off. The entryway is, you have a Arctic entry, and then it's very secure as far as entering the facility. Secondly, the transportation, we do have a good working relationship with the Third Avenue Navigation Center. They do have a shuttle. They had that shuttle utilized during the Sullivan Arena era where they would come in, pick up clients, take them down to Third Avenue Resource Center, engage with them during the day, and then either bring clients back, transition out. I don't foresee a lot of foot traffic around this area. We hope to have every resource that a person would need inside the shelter: navigation services, food, showers, bathrooms, things of that. I would hope that people would utilize public transportation, but I can't tell you if the contractor will have abilities to shuttle people. I can only talk about outside entities that we know of, like CSS and their shuttle. I hope that makes sense.
No, that answers the question. I would advocate that. That is a strong consideration with respect to transportation. It should be more embedded into the way we design access and connectivity for folks, so that foot traffic is not a thing necessarily. And as we increase bus ridership, the disproportionate amount of clinical need on public transportation is also a challenge. So I just think that if we think dedicated transportation, maybe it's amplifying that particular tool. Thank you.
All right. So you guys have seen these photos. And this is one of the things that I just went over is the front entry. When you enter the facility, there really is a secured Arctic entry. There's 3 doors. The door that you see to the right is an elevator. That elevator is not operational and will not be operational for the emergency cold weather season. So if we do have clients that need ADA accommodations, we hope that with the other facilities bidding on the ITB, we will be able to transport anyone seeking shelter to an ADA compliant facility. The front door that you see to the left here, that is a front office. It was for clerical work at SWS for people to come in, pay their bills, talk with someone. And then there's a door that you cannot see to the left, which actually goes into the hallway of offices. So if you are not a client of the facility, or you're trying to, engage in predatory behavior, there really is not a location on this footprint for you to do so. Once you enter the facility and you become a client, you are escorted down a hallway essentially to meet with navigators, housing specialists, intake, and then it goes into the large bay, and that large bay is protected by a cedar fence. So speaking of the fence, next photo is a fenced-in outdoor space for outdoor activities. We do have plans to put picnic tables, lights out there, kind of make it more of a engagement feel than just a parking lot with a cedar fence around it. I really want it to have a livability so people want to hang out outside, enjoy the fresh air, and get to hang out and converse with people. There's also a little green kiosk that you see that's historically been used as a smoking section. And then we have not discussed the viability of pets, but we do believe we will have pets on site at this facility. Did you have a question?
Ms. Alatel.
Thank you. Excuse me. Will this be outside of the sleeping space, the only other communal recreation space at the facility? Or will there be other spaces like you mentioned food and dining? Will those spaces be open like day room capacity when not being used? So is it the intention to have monitors in the other parts of the building, or is it to keep monitors in the garage bay area and outside for kind of daytime use by clients who may not be currently engaged in services?
Through the chair, I think personally for the protection of clients, we don't want people who are not engaged with the facility to be allowed into the facility.
That's not my question.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
I'm staying at the facility. I can hang out on my bunk,
Mhm.
obviously, but what if I don't want to just hang out on my bunk? It's really cold. I don't want to go outside. Is there anywhere else for me to sit down and have a cup of coffee with someone else while, where's my living room or where is this other space? Would that be the dining area or will it only be this outdoor space and the sleeping area?
If you go to the next slide.
That's fine. You can wait. I just, because you were talking
Yeah,
about
yeah.
this as a communal space.
And I
Absolutely.
also have a
And-
question on the previous slide.
Okay.
but, you can go ahead and finish.
Okay. So last part of the slide is a locker room. There is quite a number of lockers that were used in this facility by SWS workers. We do plan to engage and use those lockers for additional personal safety or personal stuff and have locks available to clients to place their stuff in lockers.
So are there enough lockers for everyone to have secure storage?
Yes.
There are 150 lockers.
Yeah. So there's multiple locker rooms. There's a green locker room and a blue locker room. You just can't see them in these photos.
Okay. And then is the intention to do these lockers a lot like Catholic Social Services does at Third Avenue? So it's monitored and staff are allowing access, or will it just be open and available to clients to come and go? Or are you leaving that up to the provider?
Through the chair, I think I would leave that up to the provider and how they plan to staff the facility. These locker rooms are in the same facility as the showers. And so we may have some operational things that we need to work out.
Go ahead, Randy.
Are there any laundry facilities on site?
Through the chair, there is a room that is equipped to add laundry room facilities on site, but we did leave it within the operator if they wanted to have laundry on site or if they wanted to engage with other laundry facilities, kind of like we did at Sullivan to supplement.
Didn't we purchase a number of really high industrial washing setups for the Sullivan Arena? Do we not possess those?
Through the chair, they may still be in the Sullivan Arena. I'm actually not sure if we acquired them or if they were already there when we.
No, I think we ended up replacing and bringing in a number of them. So it'd be worth looking because they might be portable enough that they could just be ported over. Sorry, go ahead, Mr. Schultz. Then I have Ms. Brawley and then Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, just to add on to that, there might have been some resources from the Navigation Center construction project I purchased that there may be some pieces there you might be able to use as well. I seem to remember laundry machines being in that package.
Ms. Brawley.
Thank you. I had a question just about pets, and I appreciate attention to that. Obviously, we care about humans and we want them to have a safe place to be, but also I know a lot of people have animals, right? And that's very important to them. I just wondered, given that pets will not be allowed in non-congregate shelter, I imagine there's logistics issues with this, but would it be possible for those folks to also utilize this facility for keeping their pets, depending on capacity? And I raise that because I know there's logistical issues, especially just getting from one to the other every day. But also I just want to recognize that that there may be people who are appropriate for non-congregate shelter except for a pet. And so it's a way to maybe help sort out folks to make sure they're in the right place. Thanks.
Through the chair to Ms. Brawley. So this was a concern that was brought up during Sullivan Arena because we did have a number of people that had pets that we believed would do well in a non-congregate setting. One of the issues that I would flag is that historically we had people that would not come back to see their pets for a day or two, and then it was left on shelter staff to take the dog out, make sure the dog was fed. And then we had issues where after 3 days you couldn't figure out where, you know, the pet parent was. And so then it was our job to contact animal control, go through that whole process. And then of course, like the next day someone would show up and say, where's my dog? And so we would have quite a number of additional tasks to do that. So we made the decision, I think a month in, that if you wanted to have your pet on site, you had to be there and you had to agree to take your dog out twice, you know, make sure your dog was fed, and that the responsibility was not on shelter staff.
Anyone else? Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate the presentation. So I guess a few questions. First is, so you stated early on in the presentation that you met with I believe you stated both with the Midtown Community Council and the Campbell Park Community Council. Is that correct?
Through the chair, I personally met with Midtown Community Council yesterday, and then a member of the mayor's office of community engagement, Michelle Hodel, met with Campbell Park.
Thanks. So I appreciate that. So the Midtown Community Council, just so us Midtown representatives can get full clarity, was that with the board or was that another kind of setting?
Through the chair, I was just invited to attend a meeting. I'm actually not sure of the semantics of it, but we
Sure.
did meet.
Thanks. So can you share a little bit about the results of that conversation, what concerns were raised and how you addressed them?
Through the chair, we met yesterday morning at 10 a.m. The meeting was about an hour long. The number one thing that they were concerned about is, does this shelter allow for Midtown to get some relief from the problems that are occurring at Cuddy Park? They thought this was a good location. They asked about transportation, public safety. Would neighboring businesses be impacted financially? We talked about their financials that they've incurred since the beginning of opening of Cuddy Park. And so I would say that it was favorable. They never raised any or flagged any concerns.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a departure from what I'm used to from Midtown Community Council, but that's okay. And then I guess, Mr. Chair, I have a question since this is a work session specific to SWS and specific to this resolution before us, where that was included, AR 2023-299 S as amended. Would it be appropriate or not for me to ask questions, again, specific to SWS, but that are related to some of the policy matters that were included in the appropriation resolutions? And I specifically around housing first, maximum size of 150, warming areas not to be co-located, requiring the provider to use HMIS CE assessment.
I don't know why it wouldn't be proper to ask questions about the various operational elements of the plan. So I think the purpose of today, as it was stated, the mayor asked for a work session after the committee meeting so we could have a discussion and get a sense of where we are as a group as we lead towards any action that may come forward. And so I think the mission today is to get as many of those questions answered so that if there is an action item on the 10th or sooner, we figure that out now as much as possible. So I think your latitude is broad with this, is try not to put Ms. Zolotel in a weird place.
Thanks. Yeah, that's why I asked the question. Okay, perfect. Thanks for that clarity, Mr. Chair. Then if you don't mind, I'll just try to go through these quickly. Some of them can just be quick responses, Ms. Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
So first is part of that resolution, and for folks who are wondering, both of the policy sections were included in both of the resolutions, but if you want to look at the last one, it was AR 2023-298S. So one of them is about housing first principles, and specifically in the resolution, it talks about successful transitions into housing and optimal maximum stays of 90 days. Can you please talk about how SWS and usage of the old SWS admin building as congregate shelter would meet that?
Yes, through the chair to Mr. Rivera, our plan is always to get people out of shelter and into housing. We do know that there is a gap in available housing, especially affordable housing, but it is our goal, especially as a contract administrator, to work with the future provider to make sure that they are housing focused.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Can you just speak to a little bit more about how that might happen?
Through the chair to Mr. Rivera, we plan to utilize all office space for navigation services with nonprofit partners. We've had success housing people through the VA, through permanent supportive housing, working with vouchers, moving people, especially into Golden Lion, Lakeshore, hopefully the Barrett soon. We've been very focused on getting people into housing and not into shelter because we do know that housing is more affordable than sheltering.
Great, thank you. One of the other parts of that resolution was that, especially and specific to congregate shelter, that it shall have a maximum size of 150 individuals. Will the administration be keeping in line with that?
Through the chair, yes, sir. We are absolutely remaining at 150 people on this site. We believe with the two non-congregate facilities that responded to the RFI that we will be able to meet the community needs and still remain under the 150 cap.
Great, thanks. Another section talks about warming areas not being co-located with emergency shelter. Will that also be followed?
Through the chair, yes, sir, it will.
Great. And then last two are somewhat related. So it requires the provider to use HMAS and requires the provider to also have a coordinated entry assessment within 7 days of their initial stay. Is this something that was incorporated in the RF or ITBs that went out, or will it be incorporated into the contracts?
Through the chair, I believe the answer is yes to both. I know that it was included in the ITB and therefore it should be in the contract.
Great. Thanks. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. So I have myself in the queue briefly just to point out, as I was briefly discussing with Ms. Zalatel when she, myself, and Mr. Weddleton put the 90-day requirement into the code, it was not as a black and white thing. It's not like you come in on the 1st and 90 days later you're gone. What the operator needs to do is demonstrate efforts to help move people along, especially those who've been there longer, because in a way it's irrational to have a black and white cutoff that would suddenly recreate the problem we have just 90 days from now. And so I want folks to understand that the mission isn't on 90 days, day 91, you're evicted. It's we need to have the operator demonstrating progress towards helping individuals move through the system towards a housing opportunity. Sure.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. And that's why the policy language that I crafted specifically talks about an optimal maximum stay of 90 days. I think in a perfectly healthy HPRS, that would be what is done. But if 90 days can't be achieved for whatever reason, there's not enough housing, etc., then that's fine. But certainly I think that optimal verbiage is, I think, the key word.
Yeah, very good. And so I just want to make sure I said that. Ms. Alto, you were also in the queue about the Midtown issue.
Yep. Excuse me. So I want to really make sure we're connecting with the community councils, not just their executive boards. So I think you met with the Midtown Community Council Executive Board because Midtown Community Council meets at noon on a Wednesday. So if, and it may not occur before the October 15th date, but maybe if you could ask to be on their council's agenda, because that is a more broad representation of the Midtown community. And then I presume you met with Campbell Park, or whoever met with Campbell Park Community Council met on a Thursday evening, not with their executive board, but with the whole council itself.
Through the chair to Ms. Zalatel, yes, last
Okay.
night was the meeting.
No, that could not have
Last
been.
Thursday.
Oh, great. Okay. Yes. I just want to make sure if we're really intending that we're putting notice out and we're using the community council structure, we're meeting with the whole council and not just those executive teams. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anyone else in the queue? So I just have one question. We can probably end here. The question is, the real matter that was kind of discussed at the meeting when we passed this on the 12th was does the administration have a plan, and does it believe that this is the best use of this facility in this process we're working on at this time? And so, want to answer that question.
Through the chair, can you ask that one more time?
Is this an opportunity we should proceed on, in your opinion, at this time?
Through the chair, personally, I have walked through this building. I think there's never going to be a perfect building that's already built, that's not purpose built for a shelter. But I will tell you, location wise, where it's located on transit, the facility, I think we have an opportunity to have a really great small site in Midtown at a very low cost. And there's an opportunity. This building is not, being utilized. It's a municipal or an enterprise owned facility. I really think in the short term, this is a good viable option for us to use, especially with cold weather coming along. So.
All right, I got two more questions. Maybe the last questions, Ms. Brawley and then Ms. Zalatow.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question, but then I also want to note, we were peeking ahead and it looks like you have an additional slide. So I just want to note that we should finish that out.
Okay. I thought-
But my question was actually, looking ahead to next year, generally we've talked about emergency cold weather shelter through say April 30th, knowing that the weather changes but also knowing our need is not going to end on April 30th. So what at this point is your end date at this facility?
Through the chair to Ms. Brawley, that's a great question. We have discussed publicly that we would like to see Title 16 include date-specific activation and deactivation. I would like to see this facility utilized through the end of April. But I also want to add that, I have mentioned to some members that if this is a good facility and it's properly run and it's managed accordingly and it doesn't have any, problematic issues, that we should look at using this facility for a small site for the most vulnerable, like we did at Sullivan, at least through the next summer. So we don't have the same problems that we have right now at 3rd and Ingra and Cuddy, while also focusing on bringing new housing units online. We know that we had a 40% decrease in people seeking shelter this winter over last winter. And so I think if we continue to bring more hotel conversions online, we could have even less people seeking shelter by next winter.
Thanks. And then I'll just acknowledge also funding is a factor there too. Thanks.
So before I hand it over, I want to point out two things. One, I say it's unwise to set the benchmark at no problems. I think a wiser benchmark is no unmanageable problems or a scale of problems that doesn't overwhelm the process. But I think setting up the benchmark at no problems is setting up an impossible standard. And I really appreciated what I just heard you say, 40% reduction in those seeking shelter. There's a logical reason for that, and it's amazing. It's not what you hear about, but that is that we're housing people. So next I have Ms. Zalatow, then Ms. Bronga, and Mr. Martinez.
So a couple more logistical questions. How many showers are there? And did we go through the building department to make sure it's an adequate number of showers per building code for the number of people served?
Through the chair to Ms. Zalatow, there are 3 showers on site, and this is the same number of showers that we're actively working at Sullivan Arena last year.
Okay, I would like to know what the building code would require for the number of showers, partly because you have an eye toward maybe a continued use for this facility. In terms of highly vulnerable beyond winter, we do need to keep in mind it's not ADA compliant and what the implications for that would mean. And then because it looks like it's one large sleeping area, at the Sullivan Arena, we were able to divide population with kind of physical areas. What is the plan for various populations within the facility? Or is it meant to just be all together?
No, through the chair to Ms. Zalatow, we do have plans for separation between men and women and then highly vulnerable population, which would be a smaller subset. So we do have plans for physical barriers between sleeping.
Is there a cost associated with that?
Not a substantial cost, no.
Okay. And then the last question I have, and it may need to be referred to solid waste services, is in the solid waste services master plan. This this building is a key piece to the extension of our landfill's life, which shutting down the landfill is a very expensive proposition. It's meant to be a waste diversion facility. It's already been delayed in coming online. And so I would want to explore if there's any intention to use this facility beyond this winter, what the impacts would be for the solid waste services master plan, particularly around the waste diversion planning that I'm aware of that's in there.
Through the chair to members, Zalatel, yes, good points, and we've already started those discussions with solid waste services. Thank you.
So next, Ms. Braga, Mr. Martinez after.
I'd really like to let her finish her slideshow first.
Mr. Martinez.
you don't mind.
Your question.
I can wait to the slideshow. One of the points was about the most vulnerable in compliance and ADA compliance and accessibility. And while I have the mic, I'll just repeat, if there are indeed vulnerable folks, then the further we move from core resources, the more we need to really consider what kind of transportation, embedding transportation options we can support and provide.
Thank you. Next slide, please. I'll go quick through these slides. So there are showers on site for men and women. There are 2 small kitchens to allow for warming of personal food. These are not commercial grade kitchens, and there will not be commercial cooking on site to fulfill the 3-meal requirement. And then to Ms. Zolatel's point, this large indoor space that is carpeted, we do have plans to work with a contractor to install TVs and tables and chairs just to have a day engagement hangout, your living room.
Separate from dining.
Separate from dining. Next slide. So I do want to give some noteworthy updates. We are working with law to find solutions. I know that because the municipality works with SWS, that they think it's a municipality owned building. It's actually an enterprise owned building. So we're working with law to figure out the best way to lease up this facility. There are some questions regarding MUSA and how that plays into it. So we are working with law. It's still underway, and we'll give updates as soon as I get them. I just wanted to apologize that we will have a number of late on the table at the 10:10 meeting due to timeframes and the ITB closing late. The last update is that we have had questions of the closures of camps and which camps are going to be prioritized. Our priority remains at 3rd and Ingra. And then we do have some construction currently underway at Chonsnu that the contractor is having some issues with campers. And so I believe that will be our second encampment. And then we'll reassess under Martin v. Boise which camps can and will be able to be closed beyond that.
So I have Ms. Braga next.
So just so I don't forget, when you go to Chonsnu Park, I hope first Valley Street Park is looked at. It's got neighbors close in, and there's a really rough group down there. So they could kind of be a package deal. They're very close, but that group is particularly rough. So my question, which it looks like you guys don't have a figure yet because you're still working with legal, but I was kind of sad to see the 150,000 for the fire suppression. And then I'm wondering if you have an idea of the cost of the lease. But that's what you're working out with legal now.
Through the chair, I'm going to invite Ben Bowman up to the dais.
Good morning, all. Ben Bowman, Morning, all. Ben Bowman, Assistant Municipal Attorney. I've been assisting in preparing for the lease. We're not yet drafting. We do have a model of a lease like this that has been done elsewhere. The police department leases some space at Merrill Field. And so that's one way we could transfer control of this facility from Solid Waste Services, which, as Alexis mentioned, is an enterprise of the municipality, to a non-enterprise organization. There's some implications on that, not only the O&M costs, which are currently part of the SWS rate, but also MUSA costs, which are part of the SWS rate. So how we make sure that the SWS rate is not inadvertently and indirectly subsidizing the use of the facility is one of the questions for the lease. But we have an example of how that's done already, and it's my understanding from real estate is that previously it's been done kind of at an at cost level.
Thank you. And that I had two more questions. One, when I toured the facility, there are tons of interior rooms. I mean, I actually pictured there were way more spaces than you would possibly need for navigation. Is there any thought that, maybe like a step system that some people move to interior rooms? Some kind of structure like that. That was one thing. And then the other, I know that our church communities, I guess it was the food handling is an issue, but church communities who can't house people because they don't have sprinkler systems could bring food. And is there any possibility of having some sort of system where churches provide the food?
Through the chair to Ms. Branga, we did work with food safety, and they do have provisions in food safety for church potlucks and such. And so there is capabilities. The contractor will have to have volunteer liability insurance. And so that's something that will have to be discussed moving forward with the contractor in order for them to have volunteers bring food onto site. Through the chair to Ms. Branga, I have not looked into using interior rooms for a step-up system, but that's something we can definitely look into for you.
So I have Mr. Martinez next, myself and Ms. Salatil. You're good. So, okay. I only want to comment on the food thing. I personally, it's fine if churches want to bring food as a supplement, but I think whatever plan we have, it needs to have 3 meals a day planned into the system so that we don't find ourselves in a position where we hear again, we're starving. We just need to upfront make sure that that's taken care of. But I do love the idea of churches providing some additional support, especially if it's inside managed and not just kind of outside and creating lines of people out on the streets, which has happened at Carlick Street. But I just want us to make sure whatever plan we have for food is paid for and delivered and ready to go for everybody who needs it, so that we, again, don't hear arguments back that people are going hungry.
And through the chair to Ms. Branga and to Mr. Constant, I believe it's AR 2022-420 that requires 3 meals a day to be contractually obligated under that. So
Yeah, thanks. I love the idea of churches, but it has to be dependable. Ms. Salatil.
Thanks. So 2 points. One, on the SWS, they typically come to us at the first of the year for a rate increase. We want to be really clear as we're having that conversation so that we can communicate clearly with ratepayers, the public, about how this use won't, if we are also raising rates. We just want to be really clear that we're not passing those costs on. I think Mr. Colhais wants to respond to that really quick.
Ms. Collins.
Yeah, thank you, members Alatel. Exactly. I've already, issued guidance that we should make sure that solid waste is made whole and that they're not subsidizing this effort. Thank you.
Great. We'll make sure we get that scheduled for the November Enterprise and Utilities Oversight Committee meeting. And then on volunteers, I just happen to know the new municipal insurance requirements for volunteers, even if you're a church, are pretty extensive. And so the idea of thinking that people will be volunteering in a contractually run municipal building will be very hard to meet for most churches. There's like 3 or 4 different insurance policies that have to be held, and they're pretty extensive.
Do I have anyone else in the queue? Mr. Rivera. Anyone else? I don't see anyone else. You're on the spot, Mr. Rivera.
Fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, I just want to clarify for the record the food policy, which Ms. Johnson stated, AR 2022-420, and I'll just go ahead and read the section in here. It is the policy of the municipality of Anchorage that all emergency shelter locations provided for by the municipality under AMC Chapter 16.120 shall provide a minimum food service level of 3 meals a day to include breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This requirement does not extend to private sector providers for emergency shelter designated by the Anchorage Health Department whose services are not by contract with the municipality. So just to be perfectly clear, this resolution and the intent and clear language behind it means that yes, churches or other groups could provide food just as long as we're meeting that minimum food level, service level of 3 meals a day to include breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Thanks.
Anyone else? So I want to thank everybody for being here and ready for this discussion, the second discussion of AR 2023-299S and its implications. We've heard from the administration that their position is that we should proceed with this. We've had lots of questions from the members and nothing that has risen to the level of an objection. And so with that, what legislative processes are we anticipating next? What are the last steps?
Through the chair to the chair. We are going to have 3 documents laid on the table pertaining to contractors, possibly 6 if food is outside of that. So we'll have service providers and possibly food at 3 locations unless those service providers subcontract for food. And then I don't know if a lease will have to go before the body for approval, but we will put it forward if you guys want it.
Yeah, absolutely. Land disposals of almost any kind should come before the assembly. So you said laid on the table. Is there any chance these documents can be ready by Thursday at noon? A week from yesterday? The addendum, I guess, is my point is much better than laid on the table.
Through the chair, no, unfortunately, the ITBs won't have closed. One of them will not have closed by then.
As much as possible, items for the addendum are better than items laid on the table. So go ahead, Ms. Alatal.
So is the lease contemplated to be between solid waste services and another municipal department, and then another lease between with a contractor, or will the contractor just be operating in a building now controlled by a different municipal department? Thanks.
Through the chair to Assemblymember Zalto, the latter of those. We're going to have some kind of transfer of control between solid waste services and the health department, I believe, so that we move operations and control and obligation out of SWS. And the hope is to then capture those SWS costs and move them out of SWS as well. And then once it is a municipal facility of a non-enterprise department, then have an operation contract, not a lease. So akin to the Sullivan.
Great. It'd be good if that document can make the addendum more than some of the contractual ones, because I think that will maybe need some time to have a chance to look through it.
If I could, Member Zalto, which document, when you say that document?
The lease agreement between the inter departments, right? Or is that there no intention to bring a lease from SWS to another department to us?
Through the chair to Assemblymember Zalto, we'd bring that lease. It's totally acceptable. We're working on exactly what form of legal document, like how robust the lease would be, because it could technically just be an MOU because it's between departments, but a lease would probably be better. And right now, I'll be honest, we got the real estate folks working on it, not myself. So they're figuring out what best form it would be, what they've done in the past. And as I mentioned, they do have a model of what's been done in the past. So,
okay, this is just sounding complex enough that if it could be in the addendum, that would be helpful versus laid on the table. You might find yourself in a delay. Thanks.
Anyone else? Hearing and seeing none, we will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you. We'll be back here at 10 after.